In almost 9 years of hosting Retiring Today with Lauren Merkle, I've learned that what happens in Washington impacts your retirement. Saving for retirement feels like such an individual process. You have an individual 401k, you have an individual retirement account or an IRA. If you're married, maybe you feel like you're saving with your spouse and you've got a goal for retirement. So what's happening in Washington, those lawmakers that are there, they do impact your retirement. And in a presidential election year, you may even be feeling that more. You may be worried. Maybe you're worried if a certain candidate gets elected, that'll have a negative impact on your retirement. So that's what we tackled today. The presidential election, your retirement. Specifically, we talked about taxes. So one of the things that lawmakers are talking about, and both presidential candidates are talking about, is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was passed in late 2017 under the Trump administration and then went into effect in 2018. Essentially what that did was reduce rates on almost all tax levels. That piece of legislation is set to expire in 2025. So a lot of people wonder what will happen. Well, generally, again, very broad terms here, if a Republican is elected, generally what they're going to try to do is extend that for 8 to 10 years. So those tax cuts will stay in place. If Democrats are in power, they will likely let it expire and then adjust those rates for inflation. Now, I just mentioned the president. I can't talk about the president without talking about Congress, because we do know, too, no matter who's in power, they have a quicker path to passing legislation if Congress is in the same political party as they are. If they're different political parties, we know that it's harder for them to pass legislation. So anything we're talking about here today, we're talking kind of about the president, but we also know that who's in power in Congress has a lot to do with it as well. Tax brackets, that's one piece of the equation when talking about the election. Another is the total tax environment. So what does that mean? Well, we talk about the individual saving process, the 401k and the traditional IRA. Those are accounts generally that you haven't paid taxes on before. They're called tax deferred accounts. So what are some proposals that we've seen in the last couple of years in regards to those tax deferred accounts? Well, they could limit the tax deferrals depending on overall account balances. That's something lawmakers have talked about. There's a potential for the RMD to change, kind of forcing some of those assets out sooner so that they can be taxed. Remember that the RMDs are the required minimum distributions. That's the age at which you're required to start taking money out of those accounts you haven't paid taxes on before. We know that age has changed in recent years. Generally, for a lot of people right now, it is 75. They might put some regulations on the size of tax-deferred accounts that you're able to save, maybe put a limit on how much tax-deferred money individuals can have. Another part of the overall total tax environment that lawmakers talk about is Social Security. You know, it wasn't too long ago that Social Security wasn't taxed at all. In the 80s, under President Reagan, that's when Social Security started being taxed at the federal level. Then those taxes were changed to be up to 85% of your benefit could be taxed. That happened under the Clinton administration. So could they tax 100% of your benefit? I think that's another thing that could impact your retirement. So those are just some of the examples of things that could change depending on who's in power in Washington. There's a lot more nuance, and there's a lot more that you could drill into on a level of percentages and numbers. That's the stuff the retirement planners here at Merkle Retirement Planning watch. Clint Hunrods, he's a retirement planner. He was on our show today talking about the election and taxes. And what he said that he just had a visit with someone who said, I don't want to mess with all of this. This is why I want you guys on my team. You're watching this for me, because for a lot of people, watching some of these things can cause you stress and anxiety. You might be worried about who's elected. Now, on a social level, we know that people watch certain issues very closely, but your retirement, we're just sticking to your retirement today. And the last thing that you want is to turn on that election show, whatever channel you're watching as the election results come in on that Tuesday in November, and be worried about who's going to be elected and how it impacts your retirement. So what can you do? Washington feels a long ways away. Some of the decisions lawmakers make, we feel so disconnected from them. How can I impact that? Well, you can vote. That's one thing you can do on an individual level. But even more than that, you can take control of your retirement. There are things that you can do right now to to put yourself in a better position to retire, especially when it comes to taxes. That's what we talked about on the show today. Lauren talked about the tax brackets, how they could change, how that could impact one specific tax bracket. He kind of broke it down that way. And then what people can do right now to get ahead of that. If you think generally that taxes are on sale, which most people do, there are things you can do right now to take control of your taxes and then feel a little bit better no matter who's in power. The retirement planners here at Merkle Retirement Planning help people think of taxes as a long-term event. They help you think of them as something you'll pay throughout retirement. So if you think about taxes long-term, then there are things you can do long-term to help put yourself in a better position, be more tax efficient, maybe even pay less in taxes. Because if you pay less in taxes, then you have more money to spend in retirement. So what does that look like? Here's a great way to see exactly what tax savings strategies look like. It's our online Journey to Retirement workshop. Here's what happens in that workshop. There's a couple, John and Sue. They are looking at taxes long term. Our retirement planners show you how they help them save 6 figures on taxes. What would you do with an extra $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 in retirement? You could take a lot of vacations. You could plan a legacy. You could help pay for the rising cost of healthcare. You could help kind of hedge for inflation or beat inflation in retirement. Every single penny counts, and if you can save money on taxes, there's a lot more you can do in retirement. See what long-term tax planning looks like. In our online Journey to Retirement workshop, you can sign up now by going to retirewithmerkle.com.